Hey everybody, welcome.
Hello.
I have a suspicion that more people are gonna hop on, so we'll maybe wait like 5 minutes to see if other people want to join us today. But how's it going, everybody?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
Nice
Excited,
to meet you
excited.
all. There's some nice amps you got there, Mitchell.
Yeah, I've been trying to build me rig up.
Hello.
I am. I am. Nice to see you again. Welcome
Yes.
back. Nice to see Bryce and Tasha again, and welcome, Sudie Bell. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I figure people are gonna probably be coming on in the next like 5 or 10 minutes, so I thought we'd kind of wait before we get started. But how you doing, Emily?
I'm doing great. I just basking in the news of I was employed. I got accepted for new employment. So during COVID times
That's
it's been
great.
really tricky. So it's yeah. So I've been trying to manifest it and it came true. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank
See,
you.
after only one chapter of the Kybalion, you're already able to
I
work some
got it.
pretty powerful
Got
magic.
it.
It just clicked. You're like, I don't need the rest of this stuff, just one chapter. That
Uh, oh, your dad's back.
yeah. Hey,
Hey, Jake.
hi.
Hi.
So did you listen? You listened to the audiobook, huh?
I listened to, I was like listening to the audiobook and I was thinking, how could you possibly listen to this without reading it? It just
Yeah, I think
requires
people.
real attention.
I think people's like different people retain information in different ways. Like for me, even when I was a kid and I was like learning in school, I always was drawing and stuff. And something about, I don't know, like I retain information better if I'm doing something kind of automatic or something that engages my conscious mind. So the information can kind of be stored in my subconscious or something. Like I can't explain it, but that seems to work for me.
I don't know. I listened to it and listened to it, and then I read it, and I was like, okay, I still don't
Yeah,
understand, but that's all right.
we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, I think listening is kind of good after you read it, just to reiterate it and think about it some more. That's how
Yeah.
I like to use it, for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I may bail a little early tonight, so don't anyone take it personally. I'm like wiped. So just so everybody knows. I'm
It's
glad to
okay.
be.
We're glad you're here. And we got Tommy Agalos. Got some new faces today.
May I ask, were you on page 17? Is that where you?
Yeah, we read up through page 16, but we're going to be talking this time starting with page 11 in my book. I don't know if there's different page numbers for different versions of it, but we're going to start by talking about the principle of vibration, which is nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates.
Thank
Ain't
you.
it the truth?
Yeah, sure is. Anybody, Sudie Bell, you want to just introduce yourself because this is your first time coming on? And for anybody that it's their first time, if you just want to introduce yourself and say where you're coming from and what brought you to this group.
All right, I am Sudie Bell. I live in Kansas City, Missouri, and I saw about this book club on your, I think it was your Instagram, Jake. And I had seen a couple of books on your Instagram stories that you had posted, and so I was interested, and I just reached out, and we ended up selecting this book. And I have read this before, and in fact, I read it a couple years ago, and I did a painting based off of it that I sold at one of the first shows that I painted at here in Kansas City. So it had very special meaning to me. It was called Mental Gender and the 7 Hermetic Principles. And I had read this book, and so I started live painting this at Lighting of the Moon, which is on a Native American property church. And so I feel like a connection to this book. And so there was also something that came up inside of me about reading this book, and it is the hermetic nature of it. And kind of I've kept this aspect of myself quite to myself for quite a long time. And so pushing through that fear and coming on here has been really a good experience for me to grow, because it's important right now. Nobody's going to get crucified for reading this stuff. So it's important that we, share information with each other, and, bounce ideas off of one another, and really integrate the information into our lives. So
Absolutely.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're really stoked that you're here. And I think that absolutely it's a perfect time to dive into spiritual work, because people have so much, generally speaking, people have a lot of time to just kind of be what, and with the circumstance, with a lot of people in lockdown, and a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands alone, it's the perfect time to really dive into this stuff and to begin to contemplate it and to use this as an opportunity to grow.
Absolutely. So I'm grateful to be here. Absolutely. 100%. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome.
And anybody else who's just tuning on for the first time, Mitchell or Shara, do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
why'd you go, Mitchell? You go first.
All right. Hi guys. My name's Mitch. I'm from Australia. In the state called Victoria. We're on the top of the map. We're a desert, or an oasis in the desert. So we're a desert, but we've got a massive river that runs through it. What brought me to this class, Jake? I've been following you on Instagram for a while, but what caught my attention was you drew a painting of Adam Jones with the eye coming out of his forehead. And as a kid, that man inspired me to pick up a guitar, and sort of gave a meaning that there was more to music than just sounds. There was something else behind it, and that drew me down to a psychedelic journey. And I had a trip on DMT where they gave me 3 things to do. One was stop poisoning yourself, and it wasn't just food that you consume as an energy, but being aware of how you spend your energy and people around you, especially vampires, people that are negative vortex, and if you're around them, they you adapt to them. And the second and third thing was yoga and meditation. And again, the whole yoga side of things of unity and aligning your instrument as a body. But I've always been interested in the exterior or the occult or mysticism side of it, and Tool was a big influence for that. We're creating music, and so yeah, this is why I'm here. Is your painting of Adam Jones is what drew me in. I'm like, so I've got to listen in
Awesome.
and
Yeah, right on.
see what.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't think I'd be doing this if not for Tool. I mean, they kind of they opened up the portal. They created the rabbit hole that I descended through to learn about these kind of.
I feel you on that one. So I'm glad to be here and glad to see everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
So I guess I can share too. I'm Shara. I live in Massachusetts in the United States. I I've been an artist my whole life and pagan spirituality, and so I've studied a lot of the esoteric and the mundane, and just sort of and I sort of connected with you, Jake, through like the Vision Train and the whole visionary art movement. And I've just, I don't know, I've been exploring a lot of the unseen, and somehow the whole Kybalion thing just sort of popped in front of me, and I said, oh, this is the time to be looking at this. So I'm not totally sure, where it's going to take me, but it's just one more thing to explore.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for joining us, Shara. I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts on how this is similar to ideas in paganism, because I'm not really that familiar with paganism. And also, if you hang out a lot on the Vision Train, if you want to let other people there know about this, anybody's welcome to join in this book club if they want to. So if you want to be in it,
I will definitely mention it. I conduct, so I'm one of the drivers of the train, I guess.
Oh, great.
I'm on there a lot. That's definitely been my virtual family. It's keeping me sane and keeping me in the studio, and it's been such an amazing place.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing that's happening.
I think I'm gonna do Stefan Lucas's class on Saturday.
Oh yeah, I really want to do that. I can't do all of them though. It's like I've done.
I'm trying to do every one. I just love it.
I would do every single one, but it's sort of
right.
I have to pace myself a little bit. But like we did, the 24-hour opening for our mushroom exhibition, and then went right into Olga's workshop, and then we were all on the playa on the virtual Burning Man. We had a Vision Train camp, and we had our exhibition there, and then we did a live art thing in the giant mushroom spaceship. And so it was like nonstop for like 2 weeks. We were just moving.
Oh, I love that. Are you in Boston? I used to live in Boston.
I'm north of Boston, about an hour north.
Nice.
Near the New Hampshire border.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like,
it's nice. We're like in farmland, and it's lots of green and away from the city.
Fabulous.
Awesome. Well, we're stoked you're here, Shara.
City Bell. Where are you?
Kansas City.
Oh wow, cool.
I used to be in Boston. I used to be in Dorchester and by Fenway.
Yeah, I lived in Somerville years and years ago, but then I moved back out to New York for a bunch of years and came back here. And I gotta say, Jake, I was in Bali a couple of years ago, and I was north of Ubud. I was in Kelabang Moding. I every time I see you like post like you did your little tour of your studio, I miss it so much. I just want to be back there.
It's a pretty nice place to be stuck right now. Like, of all the places I could be stuck, it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, for sure. And it's what you call it? It's Kybalion today, right? It's a
Yeah.
holiday. Yeah.
Well, yesterday and today. I guess it goes on for like a few days, but yeah, it's like their
Mhm.
is their second biggest holiday.
Yeah, but it feels like it happens like twice a year because it's like a 10-month calendar or something, or 8 month, like it never,
Right.
you're always like, did it just happen?
Yeah,
There's
and
always
they
something
have ceremonies like there's always some holiday.
Yeah, I got to do a lot of ceremonies with them because I was living with a family, you know.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm always amazed when I get to experience ceremonies, but I feel still there's like a barrier. Like if you're an expat rather than one of the locals, there's a barrier to being able to really know what goes on with all the ceremonies and rituals and stuff. But yeah, it's fascinating. I'd love to learn more.
yeah, I was there uh for their New Year. It's like Ogo Ogo and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the
Epi.
Nyapi, yeah. So
Yeah.
I got to do all of that with them too, and that was really cool. Like just all the floats and everything that they did, and the effigies and burning them, and yeah,
Yeah, I love it. It's like Bali Burning Man.
it is. It totally is. It was so
But
cool.
the day of
I felt like
silence
home.
is really incredible also.
Yeah,
It's so you would never have that anywhere in the West where just the entire island shuts down. Like everybody's in silence. There's no electricity used for
people
an
don't go
entire,
out of their homes, and
people don't
yeah,
leave and it's so peaceful. It's incredible.
it was very transformative. It's really cool. I sat and did henna all day long on
Nice.
on my family that I was there with. It was sweet.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us. Is there anybody else who's new here for the first time that wants to introduce themselves before we start? It's also okay if not. We can just dive right into it. All right. So the principle of vibration, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. So anybody want to dive into thoughts on that?
I think that it's great when you look at things and you think about um, what went into it. Like even a product that's been processed, like there's all these living parts, and like where did, even when it's something plastic, it was created from natural elements in the environment, and that energy still lives in it, and just a consciousness and awareness of how everything that's concrete is not just static. Like everything holds energy, and everything, we're all connected to all the things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the statement reminded me, actually it's in your book, Dad, I remember, but that saying that's like you can never bathe in the same river twice, because the river is constantly changing and so are you. And so it's this idea, the illusion of something being static. I see this happening a lot right now where everybody's kind of waiting for things to go back to normal. Nothing ever goes back to normal. It just life doesn't work that way. Like once changes happen, it just keeps changing and it forever mutates and forever changes and there's no going back. That's just how life works. So I think that on a kind of more mundane level, it does relate to that. And then also it reminds me a bit of this kind of like the Balinese have this animistic perspective on life where they believe that everything has a spirit. And so even, their motorcycle has a spirit, or their refrigerator has a spirit. And I think that we can kind of, from a more Eurocentric perspective might look down on that and say like, oh, that's cute. But really, I think there's a deep wisdom in that also, which is what you're saying, Shara, which is just understanding that it all comes from life and it all comes out of the universe, which is inherently alive. And everything, even if it looks static and it looks physical and it looks solid, is in a state of deep shift and flux constantly, and it is energetic and it is moving and it is alive, even though it might be a material object.
Yeah, I think for me, it's such a significant reminder of impermanence. You know, that the idea, you know, it's so interesting when you look at a television screen and you have no idea that it's made up of, you know, thousands of pixels. It looks like a solid entity, and yet it's just everything vibrating in motion that creates that. And everything around us is that. You know, there is no fixed solid entity. It's all this compilation of energy that gives us an experience, you know, and somehow I think that reminders can be really helpful for us as beings, you know, to hold that.
Hmm.
I also wonder what makes, oh, sorry.
No, please go for it.
I also wonder what makes people more able to tap to that vibration, not only from, you know, the earth, but from other people. Some people are born with that gift from an early age, and others have to develop, I guess, that gift later in life through whatever personal practices one chooses. But I wonder, in terms of vibration and just feeling that from others, I wonder how that happens, that people are just born open to it, and some of us have to work through it to be in the sense like that you walk into their room and you can feel the vibration in the room based on how people are feeling or what's happening. I just feel like what is the difference in that? I always just wondered, you know, some people have the ability by nature and some have to work towards it.
I have a theory on that, and it's a combination of things. I was attuned to Reiki energy, and that really helped me to be able to get into meditation and have some insights and understandings about energy and vibration. And you know, one quote that this principle brings out for me is, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Nikola Tesla. And after I became attuned to Reiki energy, which is honestly, it's sigils, and using them over bodies in different places with the intention of highest healing. But having that understanding, it made me realize and have some understandings about my experience and my personal journey, and that this is a body, and my spirit is inside of this avatar, and it was a choice to come into this. But I've been on many journeys, and along the way I have obtained some information and some lessons, and so I am on a certain path. And my path has given me some experiences in life. Like my sister didn't speak until she was 3 years old. And we were in a household where she needed to be able to communicate with me. And so we had to communicate with one another without words. And so there were different things that were put in my path, and different traumas and experiences that made me seek out understanding Reiki and understanding these things, which has opened up, like Nikola Tesla says, this understanding of secrets of my inner universe, so that I can share that with the world and help them to see how to get there too, you know. That's my theory on it. But yeah.
You know, it's interesting. You can actually look at it from the opposite lens as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talk about attunement and vibration and energy. You know, one of the things I do talk about is, you know, we come into this world, you know, as newborns with only one way of processing the world, and it's through feeling. You know, we don't have thought, we don't have language. We feel everything. We're attuned to everything.
Yeah.
You know, we are aligned, if you will, through attunement with frequency and vibration and feeling. And it's interesting. I mean, when it's almost in some ways the opposite, you know, from this perspective, which is as we develop, we start closing that down, you know, rather than allowing it to stay open. You know, we start relying more and more on our senses and our thought patterns and our language, and, you know, less connected to this, sometimes people call it intuitive self, you know, which is, intuition is the relationship, I think, of being attuned, if you will, with vibration and energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting
I
way to
think a lot,
look at it.
I'm sorry. I think that a lot of that sort of loss of connection to spirit is more a cultural thing. It's how we're raised in this culture, and not every culture is that way. Some cultures are much more, they give a lot more weight to dreams, and you know, and psychic and intuitive nature of dreaming. And um I don't know. I'm losing my words. It's been a long day for me, but yeah, I think that it's a cultural thing, and that it can be, you can be raised with more awareness of that, if like,
Yeah.
you know, my kids have definitely had a different experience um of the world than I did, because I tried to, you know, to nurture those, their intuitive nature and their, you know, their own creative processing. And I don't know yet how that makes them different. They're only teenagers, but um but I see that they have a strong sense of self, because they've been allowed to be who they are and not forced to fit into a particular box.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I read this, I was reading this book, and they were talking about how we're the only culture in the world, and it's only been for the last few hundred years, that makes a distinction between what is like a real experience and what isn't. Like in every other culture of the world, if you say that you met a deceased loved one in a dream, they would just take that experience for what it is, and they'd be like, yeah, that happened. You met your dead father in your dream. That's what happened. But for us, we're like, oh, that was just a dream, and therefore it wasn't real. And we're the only culture that makes that distinction on the planet. And it's only of the last, I don't know, since like the Industrial Revolution or something like that. Like, I don't really know the exact date in history, but it's relatively recent, even, that in Western culture that distinction was made. So like for the vast majority of human existence, things like dreams, visions, these kinds of more intuitive and more ephemeral and less quote unquote material experiences were considered to be just as valid as anything that happens in the mundane material world.
And when you think about it, the Industrial Revolution was the start of the destruction of, you know, everything. And a lot of it was around the fact that people became less connected to the natural world around them. People started living in houses with electricity. They didn't have to deal with when, you know, the season change and when it got darker earlier or lighter earlier. You know, they didn't have to harvest things because they could go to the supermarket and buy things, you know, and like a lot of people did not have that awareness of the life around them, of the, you know, people living in concrete, in skyscrapers, and, you know, not seeing forests and trees. And, you know, it's just where the focus is. And I think that technology is amazing. And we're all here on this chat from all different places in the world and different time zones because of technology. And it's wonderful to have it, but it needs to be balanced with the natural world, you know, and with the astral world and the intuitive world and our psychic natures. You know, I think that we're in a place right now where they're all sort of, there's this opportunity to merge everything and to be way more connected.
Totally. I've been tripping on this idea lately though, that it's like most people can understand that the forest is alive. Like there's a spirit to the forest, but if you take this kind of almost Balinese animistic perspective, and this idea also that everything vibrates, meaning that everything is alive, everything is in flux, you can apply that same perspective to a city even, and still see the city as almost like a forest where like the city is alive. There is like a spirit to a train or to a skyscraper in the same way that there's like a spirit to a tree or to various plants and things like that. And I think that is kind of what this principle is trying to get you to realize, is like the universe itself is alive. And we like to make distinctions between what is alive and what isn't. But if you realize, even, you know, they recognize this even in modern science, that everything is just energy vibrating, and matter is just energy that's vibrating at a low vibration to appear dense and material, then you can see that everything is made of that same energetic living stuff.
I think it's interesting
Oh.
from a mental health perspective, from, you know, what promotes well-being. I think when we can calm ourselves and really ground ourselves, the ability to be available and open to the vibrational forces around us becomes much more evident. You know, when we're dancing as fast as we can and we're really caught up, we don't attune, we're not attuned with all that. And it has a completely different impact on how we move through the world. You know, I was thinking what you said, Jake. You know, I took a hike with a friend of mine in Oregon, this beautiful dense forest, and we were talking about how still everything is, and then we completely stilled ourselves, and everything was in motion. Right? There was nothing not in motion, but because we became so still, we could see that despite our initial experience that everything was so still. I don't know, it was very powerful. And I think that's part of what this principle talks about.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Just like shifting perspective that quickly. I think one of the sentences that really stood out in this section for me was, the vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest, just as a rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And, you know, like people who do have certain abilities that can see past the veil, because there are different realms of existence, dimensions existing parallel to this, and people can see beyond that. They are seeing a vibration that most of us can't see because it's going so fast. The vibration is so fast, we have no comprehension of it. But the people who have that gift, somehow they are given the ability to comprehend a higher vibration with their physical senses, as opposed to just feeling it in their soul.
You know, that's the explanation for the burning bush. When Moses saw the burning bush, basically one theory is what you just said.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'm kind of curious. So I think like it's really fun to contemplate this, but I wanted to kind of jam out on the idea of what could be sort of practically gleaned from this principle that could be utilized in somebody's life. And I think Nikola Tesla is a good example, because he actually, by understanding this principle, was able to apply it to inventing certain technologies and things that we all take for granted now. I guess like for one sort of practical idea, if you think about our lives existing as a process where we stand at this kind of like interpoint between past and present, past and future, like we're the intersection of endless change and movement. And that's what the present moment is kind of like that, that meeting point between the past and the future. And if you understand that in a deep way, then you can see that at every present moment, there is infinite potential for life to fork out into any possible different direction. And so I feel that that's empowering, because by understanding the infinitude of the present moment, you can start to broaden your perspective of what you believe to be possible. And when you start to open your mind to different possibilities, then that allows for those possibilities to occur. So that was just kind of like one way I thought that this principle, by contemplating it, could be of practical use. But I'm curious if you guys have any other ideas about that.
Yeah, reading energies, picking up on vibrations, and then incorporating the other principles in with it as well. I think once you can marry them all together, that's where the real magic is. Big practice. But I like how you said that like to hone it in, instead of getting all philosophical, how can we use this practically in our lives? And I love that visual that you just gave us all. It's like you're standing at that cross point, and like 360 degrees is possible, beautiful. I love that.
I think that our mental health is pretty much the point of which that vibration change starts. Unfortunately, we live in societies, like I live in Canada, and I know a lot of places also have a flawed mental health system. They try their best, but most of it is focused on pharmaceuticals and less in holistic well-being and ways to help other people. So based on our conditioning, we grow with our own traumas, and so we don't find the necessary help to help us shift that focus or shift those thoughts into creating a better vibration. So, and we're always held back by life stresses, responsibilities, and just the point of being human. So I think in order to vibrate better is just to put the effort and the work and the education, how we can do that. And that is all mental. It's all changing that vibration based on thoughts. But unfortunately, like I mentioned, in our societies, the whole mental health system is just a process of evolution, but it stems from the mental capacity to be able to transmute that into a different level of energy. But if we're not well in our brains, how do we do that, right?
Great point. Have you ever heard of heart math? They have done studies where you can measure the coherence of people, and like if you have someone that's incoherent and their vibration is off, having 3 people that are coherent with them elevates their vibration. And that's why this quarantine was so hard. I think a lot of people are going through awakenings right now. They're understanding new information that they never even thought possible, and they don't have other people to help them in like coherent it together. And so this is so powerful and so impactful to have this opportunity to do that, because we all are becoming coherent together and we're making a way. Evolution makes a way, So this is beautiful. I'm grateful to be here.
And then going off what Emmeline, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Thanks. Kind of going off what Emmeline said, how vibration can really affect mental health. I always grew up feeling weird things or not understanding this energy that was around me. People would just say I'm overthinking, sensitive, say whatever it was. But I think a practical way to incorporate vibration into our daily lives would be to take the time to understand that while we can control our vibration and our vibration can impact other people's, we can't always control the vibrations around us. So coming into control and contact with your own vibration and understanding what can help it fluctuate in each direction would help ourselves be more compassionate with the weird things that we think we're feeling or the confusing things that are around us, to help make them make sense, because sometimes it just feels better to understand where things are coming from rather than just be like, oh, I'm not sure where this feeling's coming from or these thoughts or this and that. But I do think understanding that we do have impact on our own and on others, and then just understanding it is a natural thing, not a weird thing, you're not dramatic, whatever, you're just an empath. I think that's a practical way to incorporate vibration as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna comment I was gonna make is using it, to assist our mental health. I mean, quite literally sort of naming it, where you help instruct someone to change their vibration. When I work with people, I'll use language like that, and I'll talk about getting grounded. Actually, I have found a lot of my clients struggle with meditation. So I'm very suggestive of using things that have a vibrational nature to it, like chanting or singing bowls or sound therapy, something that is vibrational that people can attune to, and it quiets them, it grounds them, which then eliminates a lot of the anxiety that is, coursing through their body. And so I think there are real practical ways that we can use this principle.
Would you say that the principle of vibration is like, would you say that emotion is kind of interchangeable with the word vibration?
I would say that every emotion has a vibrational signature, if you will, definitely.
I would more define it as story, as it's the vibration of the stories we tell ourselves and how we hold those in our body. Because I really believe that all dis-ease and illness is holding stories in our body, and sometimes they're archetypal and ancestral and not even from our lifetime, but we hold grief and we hold guilt and we hold all the negative stories that we've been told or we tell ourselves. And the way to shift your vibration is to change the story.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead.
Sorry, have you guys heard of Joe Dispenza describe emotion as energy in motion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That reminds me of, yeah.
Right. I've been doing study with a woman, Melanie Weller, and she does what she calls biofield flow. And a lot of it's about, she has a background in physical therapy, so there's like the medical knowledge, but a lot of it is about how astrology lives in our body and how archetypal stories live in our body, and how to align your energy so that it flows. Like we, have a lot of people have vagus nerve compression, and the vagus nerve goes from like the base of your skull all the way down to your tailbone and innervates like all of the systems in your body basically. And when it's decompressed and when it's flowing, then all of the systems in your body are flowing. They're moving smoothly, and it's all about energy and keeping that energy moving in a healthy way. And so that's all vibration.
Yeah, there's probably a direct practical application for this in regards to physical health, because if you have a physical illness, that probably is related to the vibration of the cells, which creates some kind of disordered or malignant development or growth. And I mean, that's what like Joe Dispenza is really trying to to work with is the idea that you can visualize your body being healthy, and by you sending that vibration to a particular part of your body, it could actually change the way that the cells tend to grow and organize, which is pretty fascinating.
Well, you were asking about the pagan practice, and this all feeds into it too. And there have I've witnessed and participated in energy work that has done incredible healing for people, you know, and there is power in the belief. There is an awareness of how energy moves, you know, like we, you know, my particular tribe of people, we do a lot of drumming and dancing and fire circles and chanting, and it's all about energy, and it's about not just like making music, but also listening and understanding. Anybody who's ever played music and jammed understands that the conversation, that it's that you have to listen to the energy and the sounds and the spaces between them, and all of it makes up the music. You know, it's not one thing. It's not one instrument playing a note. It's that note in relationship to another note, and the person who's singing, and the people who are dancing, and we're all very aware of how that energy moves, and we move it in a circle, and we build that energy, and sometimes we'll change directions to bring the energy down, or I don't know, it breathes, it has life. It's not just the individuals. There's an alchemy to what we do, and it is very healing for me, and
Wow.
it fuels my soul.
I mean, it reminds me of just like a good like rock or metal concert also. It's like, you know, no, seriously, but you get a ton of people together in the same place. Everybody is like charging up energy, and there's so much energy packed into one space, and it can be a really collective, almost shamanic thing. And there's something about that, like, yeah, that probably stretches back to our like ancestry and things that people did thousands and thousands of years ago that we've just found a modern expression for. But there, I mean, that's vibration.
Isn't it funny that, for example, I don't like going shopping to malls in Christmas time. I don't like busy commercial things. It gives me anxiety to be around that. But if you put me in a Tool concert, I'm in heaven. It's just that difference in vibration, depending on where you're at, is just absolutely awesome.
Totally. Do you guys want to talk about the principle of polarity? Transition over to that. I mean, you know, we talked about Tool. Tool's all about the principle of polarity.
Yeah.
The principle of everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradox may be reconciled.
It's the yin and the yang. It's always the balance. Like even within art, it's so much of the process of art is that dance between light and shadow. And it's like our higher selves and our shadow work. You have to do the shadow work to get to that higher place. You can't always, I mean, you can, but you can't deny that for every good there is an equal and opposite bad, you know, like, and good and bad are really just our judgment and definition of things. You know, the Zen Buddhists would say it all just is. There is no good or bad. It all just is. It's all part of the experience. But it's like a positive and negative energy. You know, a magnet has two sides to the pole. And there's, you know, what you pull towards you and what you push away. And it's all just energy. And it's that polarity is how you work with energy. Like, what are you drawing to you, and what are you pushing away?
Totally.
Yeah.
Don't you think there should be like a signature like Liquitex brand color called Alex Gray that has like polarity? How has he not had his own gray tube paint yet? It has the little like polarity spiral.
That
like,
is
on the
so
tube.
funny. Yes. That is hysterical. I would love to. We should just make one up, like make a little label and stick it on.
Photoshop.
Yeah.
Do you guys find that it's equally attractive? Both sides are very equally attractive at times. I guess depending on our life experiences. But I'll share like in a personal note that at one point I was very attracted to anything related to darkness, all the goth stuff and all the horror movies and drawing dark art and things like that. And it became pretty much my world, even though I was working on my higher self. And then I had a vision under ayahuasca that it was a reminder that make sure that you're choosing where to focus your energy, because you can, as much as you love the dark, you can be extracted by it and overcome by it. And just, so there's a boundary that you should not cross. And I remember when I came to, I'm like, okay, I better make sure not to dig too deep into that side of that, polarity. So, and that's what the lesson that I learned in that experience. But I find that sometimes to people, they're both equally attractive, both sides, right? It's just like tread with care and awareness, I guess. Yeah.
In my experience, a lot of the people who have kind of had like the darkest, paths or have been through kind of like the most dark stuff can be some of the absolute sweetest, kindest, and most compassionate and like light-filled people. So there is an interesting relationship that, they talk about how the extremes, all paradoxes may be reconciled and extremes always meet. Like that's been my experience with people also, where a lot of people who go through kind of like the darkest experiences have a tendency to be the ones that later on have the greatest capacity for light and to be able to share that.
Yeah.
I find that that's true on all levels. Like your capacity for joy is only as deep as your capacity for pain. It doesn't mean you have to have horrible things happen to you, but I think that's so true. And when you said that, I thought of 3 people that I know who've had really, really traumatic, tragic sort of things happen to them, and who are the most lightful beings that like you almost wouldn't know that what their darkness is, because they seem so light. But it's coming through that. It's like, okay, now you have the other side. Yeah.
It forces, it's like you have a choice. Do I go on into hopelessness, or do I reconcile this and turn it around? And through that process of learning how to turn this around, you learn how to help people. And when you learn how to help people, you want to share it with people, because you don't want people to have to hurt. That's how I feel about it. It's like the Joe Campbell book, it's the hero's journey, right? But we're talking about this one.
I think Carl Jung talked about integration, the integration of shadow and persona, that they're both powerful energy sources that when integrated gives you a fullness that is completely different when either side either dominates or is denied. I also think when I read this principle that there's something very, very deep about this particular principle. It's as if, I mean, what I took from it is we cannot ultimately have experience without polarity. White on white is not essentially visible, if you will, or black on black. However, as an artist, the whole idea of contrast and shadow, and we live in dualism, and perhaps the ultimate evolution is the movement towards non-dual, when we're just pure vibrational, pure energy. But I think we need to have polarity in order to have experience. So
I think it's the resistance to the polarity that causes suffering. It's just the resistance of not being able to accept or even acknowledge or even know that there is such thing. It just overcomes our mind, and it creates a lot of suffering. And it reminds me, again, I think I brought this up before, that episode of the Midnight Gospel, when they talk about wanting to choose between the dark and the light, or hoping for this or hoping for that, kind of just understanding that everything is kind of hopeless. It's just, everything is the way that it is without polarity, and just without the, without that acceptance, it's almost impossible to live in a state of healthy vibration. But it's not easy. Not easy.
It's funny, we keep referring to the word hopeless. I'm reading When Things Fall Apart, Pema Chodron.
Oh yeah,
and
that's a great book.
Great book, and she says in there, until we reach the place of being hopeless, we're continually gonna relive the loops of samsara. That it's a reframe that being hopeless means that we accept totally who we are, what we experience. It's just an interesting way of reframing.
Yeah, and that there is a lot that's similar to this principle with kind of like a Buddhist ideology, because they are striving for equanimity or presence, which is like, we think like, it's kind of like that maybe story also, where it's like, oh, you win the lottery, and it's like, oh great, and that's like such good luck, but then you blow all your money, and then you're like then hopelessly addicted to money after that, and you're broke, and it's then it actually manifests in something kind of bad. The Buddhist perspective on life is to not see things as being either bad or good. It's just things kind of are. And there is a polarity within every circumstance, where like everything contains both what we might like to relate to as good and what we might like to relate to as bad. And that is inherent within everything. And so you're better off just kind of doing away with those concepts entirely and just allowing things to be, but I think it's also interesting, this idea that opposites are the same, differing only in degree. And they use the example here of hot and cold, where they're both measurements of temperature. They're just different degrees of temperature. And it's only defined in relationship. That, even something that's very, very, very cold for us, there's probably parts of the universe where there are significantly colder places that exist. And therefore, even the coldest thing on our planet wouldn't be it would be hot in comparison to that. And so it's only in comparison, and it's only through contrast that we are able to define these things, but they're really kind of all the same.
It's on one continuum. That was very powerful, the degree aspect of this principle.
I got a funny visual, like when Emmeline was talking about hopelessness. It's when you hit that rock bottom that you find your way out. And I just thought of the movie Network, and at the end there's, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, and everybody starts screaming out their windows, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And it's it's out of context of that movie, but it really is that point where people say, you know, this is too much, like, and it's, I need a change. And I feel like what's going on around the world with this pandemic and all of the global warming and all of the fires and all of the hurricanes and everything that it's like Armageddon in a way. And people are starting to get to that point, like, no, this is not okay. And, you know, in my opinion, that might have been good 10 years ago, you know, not now, but where it feels like almost too late. But it's the one thing that keeps people alive, even in the worst situations, is hope. It's like that song Anthem, that talks about, you know, even when you're broken, the cracks, you know, you're in your most hopeless, and the cracks, that's where the light gets in. The parts that are broken, that's where the light comes in. That's where the healing happens. That's where the learning happens. That's where the growth and the transformation happens.
Well, I can't resist sharing this. Thank you, Jake, for referencing my book. I refer to a story about, I was a big Star Trek fan, and there was an episode in Star Trek where they go to a planet, and Captain Kirk, who is the leader of the Enterprise, gets split in half. And they're two identical Captain Kirks. And one essentially represents the shadow, and the other represents the persona. And the shadow is someone who has total disregard for rules, regulation, you know, is extremely volatile and sexist. And the persona is someone who's completely indecisive with no energy. And of course, something occurs where the ship needs to attend to a life-threatening situation, and neither of these entities have the ability to really garnish what's necessary in order to save the ship. And of course, something happens and they come together, they have a big fight, and they actually become one. And as a result of becoming one, as a result of actually recognizing polarity, they're able to take the action required, you know, to save the ship. And to me, it's a brilliant metaphor. You know, it's because so much of us deny shadow. You know, we're taught to deny shadow, move away, repress shadow. The more you repress shadow, the more it comes out in, if you will, negative ways. You know, I think there's no coincidence why you went through a dark period with goth, and same thing with you, Jake, you know, with metal. And there's
I'm still in my goth days.
You're still there?
Probably forever. I'm just kidding.
Oh, look at you all.
I have black polish, you know.
Yeah, so there's something, yeah, that force and that energy, you know. So
yeah, it's also, you know, you can see this play out so much on the world stage with so much identity polarization, you know, where it's like you're Republican or you're Democrat, or you're, you know, this or you're that, or like I like this kind of music and they like this kind of music, and it creates so much separation. And you know, this, by the standards of this principle, people are the same no matter what, and they're just different kinds of degrees of ideology that are like fundamentally the same at their core. And what an amazing shift would occur in the world if people stopped relating to people based on how they perceive them as being different, and instead emphasize the ways in which everybody is the same. Because really, I mean, I've been, you know, traveled all over the world. You have too, Dad, I know. And when you meet people from all over the world, you really realize, just even if there are differences in culture, people are fundamentally the same no matter what. And if people were able to see the world in that way, there would be so much more peace, understanding, cooperation. So that's another way in which this principle is actually really pertinent, and it's actually very practical. And by people realizing this principle and adopting it, it could make really significant shifts in the world.
I think capitalism drives the divisiveness. I know that through trying to, you know, like make a living, it the divisiveness drives groups of exclusivity, and there's a desire and a primal want to be a part of something exclusive. So it fuels the economy. And so if we can all kind of see through that and see it for what it is, and, you know, understand that that's what's going on, that would be wonderful. But right now it just seems that a lot of people have gotten stuck in a loop, because what happened is everyone was stuck behind their computers with nothing to do. And it's like the rat park experiment, you know, where they have all the rats in a cage with nothing to do and cocaine water, you know, and everybody just goes for that. And it's like, I mean, I found myself even being drawn into that energy on social media, like, and I had to take a break from it. And I'm not really sure anyone in particular is driving it. I think right now it's a monster of its own. You know,
it's being driven. You should all watch The Social Dilemma.
Yeah,
the new documentary that's been released.
We've been talking about it on the train lately too. Yeah,
and it really is very much about polarization and how essentially these companies have learned how to maximize polarizing for the benefit of capitalism. It's a really incredible documentary.
There's also one called Capital that is really good.
Say again?
There's another one called Capital.
Okay.
And it's pretty much about the same thing, just about in generations what the elite or the 1% has been doing to kind of make us into the consumers that we are today, and how that evolved into when it started to what it is right now. So that was pretty good too.
I've heard that shadow capitalism is like even worse though. Like, you know, Louis C.K. has this funny bit about going to Russia in the 1980s, and this waiter like sold him a Coke, and like sort of like black market, like sold him this Coke. Like, you want Coke, and then just like he took the money and like pocketed it and then just like left. You know, and it's like, I've heard it, you know, that's even more capitalistic than in a capitalistic society. So it's like, yeah, that's a really deep question. I think people have been really asking these questions for like a long time, and I certainly don't have the answer. But, you know, how do you create a system that doesn't fall into the same traps? Because, you know, communism was an attempt at doing something different than capitalism, but then it creates this shadow black market capitalism that's like even worse.
Yeah, good point.
Soviet Union was the most capitalistic place I'd ever been to.
To my opinion, I feel like the capitalism comes from, you know, there's this greed, but greed is about acquisition. It's about having things, and the things are not really what makes happiness. You know, it's like everybody who strives to have the good life, but if you don't have someone to share it with, you know, it's kind of pointless. And so it's really more about love and connection. Like, those are the things that humans really need, but it gets twisted into that place of power, of striving for power. But it really, that's all about fear and lack mentality. And if you have the prosperity mentality, then you don't hide your resources. You share you share the wealth, you spread the wealth, because everybody, you realize that everybody's connected, everybody's part of this same energy life form. And if one person is suffering, then we're all suffering. And if you harm somebody else, you're harming yourself. And it's a really hard concept, but it's like, how do we have compassion for the evil people in the world? And I just see the ways that they're broken and they're lost, and they're
something that I found about like the last sentence here. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy, known as practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle will enable one to change his own polarity as well as that of the others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. And what I think that means is you know, you might be drawn into the pole, but you, instead of rejecting the shadow, you allow that experience, but you just allow it to go and pass and let it move through like a cloud as fast as possible and come back to center. Instead of resisting the opposite, you allow it. I think that might be part of it, but I don't know because I'm not a master of the art.
It's
but
hard
I like
to do
reading
that.
for sure.
Yeah. I think it's really difficult to do that when the whole world is under psychological warfare.
Yeah.
You know, that's where we're at right now. So if we don't acknowledge that, it's hard to get into anything close to mastery. But it doesn't mean that it's impossible. It's just waking up as we evolve.
Let's try a thought experiment. So we're talking about capitalism and greed, and you brought up the idea of generosity being like an antidote to that, and like greed. So like generosity and greed are polarities, right? Just like you can imagine a society based on giving and a society and cooperation versus a society based on competition and taking as being two sides of a polarity. How can we look at those two things and see and try to wrap our brains around how they're actually the same thing, but on different degrees of the scale?
Native Americans, indigenous cultures on this, well, I'm in America. I speak from an American perspective. I'm gonna let somebody else go. Well, okay, I'll just say it then. Native Americans, the indigenous culture, and capitalism is like two ends of the perspective. And something that my mom was talking about is like, I live in Kansas City, and there's a big uproar about the name of the team being the Kansas City Chiefs. And she's like, I really think that they should go to the indigenous peoples and say, can we have a ceremony? Can we, you know, consecrate Arrowhead? And, you know, have a coming together moment. And I really think that that forgiveness, that kind of coming together, taking the two poles and bringing them together, like in multiple different scenarios, this is just one example, is really where the power lies. But that requires people in power to humble themselves.
That requires people to step outside of polarized thinking, right? Because you know, that's another example where you even see it in kind of like when we're educated from a kind of mainstream school system about indigenous practices and thought. There's this line that's like, well, the indigenous believe this, and it's kind of like almost, it's subtly condescending in a way that people don't realize it to be, where you're saying, I don't believe this, but they do. And, you know, we can at least acknowledge that they think this, but it's still wrong based on our kind of estimation of things. Whereas if you are less engaged in polarized thinking, you're able to hold both perspectives simultaneously.
Right.
Not get caught up in the idea that, well, our way is right and their way is wrong, and they're not caught up in, well, our way is right and their way is wrong, but rather like, these are two different perspectives. How can I open my mind to be able to see in this perspective and then also see in this perspective, and not need to reject one or the other, but both see them as valid?
I think that's where like the religious argument comes in. And I've always sort of had issue with most religions because they claim to be the one and only path to enlightenment or heaven or whatever that be. And really, they're all just different paths, but they're all paths aiming toward the same thing. You know, it's like you were saying, you know, they're they're all temperatures or degrees. They're just different, they're just different flavors. But if you study world religions, you see that they all have a lot of the same ideas and ideals. They just express them a little differently. They just dress them up a little differently. And, and a lot of them also, are systems that try to keep the masses down and deal a lot with guilt and retribution and concepts that I think are so are just damaging and not supportive of enlightenment.
How do you get people into that polarized thinking, though? It almost seems like a mountain that it's infinite to climb, based on the atrocities that have happened in the world, for example, with the Aboriginal communities, right? Even until now, they're meant, although I do get their pain, I'm like South American native myself, it's just that not the ability of not being able to let go of that victim mentality, that it's causing the changes that could bring about improvements just so very slow. It's happening so slow because there's so much resistance. There's so much, and then you have the other side, which is like the white guilt, and so how do you get everybody on the same wavelength and to be open-minded, to agree to disagree, but then to get rid of the shame, the guilt, and the victimization that they feel or we feel, right?
Well,
Have you guys ever?
this, we have eons to accomplish that. So we're just in our infancy.
Yeah.
You guys read Watchmen, the graphic novel Watchmen? Basically, like the story is that the world is it's like slightly in the future, but the world is basically the same as it is now, where people are all like fighting with each other and stuff like that, and there's all this polarity. And then there's this guy who's kind of like, he's a superhero who people think is a super villain. The other Watchmen are against him, but it turns out he's actually like the greatest superhero. But his way of creating unity on the planet is that he stages an alien invasion. He basically makes it seem like the aliens invade and they blow up, I think, New York City. And then after that point, all of humanity unifies together as in an attempt to try to defend humankind, because there's this kind of like, people then have this collective sense of, well, we're all in this together and we have to defend our planet. It's just, I mean, that is one way. I hope it doesn't come to that, but people have a shared kind of like a sense of shared responsibility. We have to cooperate with each other. I mean, you don't need an alien invasion. Like, environmental catastrophe should be enough. But it's like, how do you get people to wake up to that? Like, wow, we actually have to all cooperate here together, or else we're not going to survive.
I think we should put like LSD in the drinking water.
People tried it. Unfortunately, sounds like a good idea.
I was only half kidding about it, because I feel like what there's this illusion. So many people see this illusion of what life is about and what's important, and really, like you said, it's all the same. It's all degrees of the same thing, and there's vibration and polarity, and there's a lot of other sorry, I keep losing my track. I think that it's just about how people see things. And I think about like the Matrix. Like, there's another example in recent culture, that everybody was living in this world with the illusion that they were on this planet and walking around and having a life, and really they were slaves, and they were chained to this machine and fueling this machine that wasn't serving them in any way. And it's just a parable. It really is kind of what's going on, because so many people are stuck in this, go to work, have a job, go to work that job to pay the bills, to have a life so that you go to work. And, it's like this vicious cycle, and they're not living their life. Maybe they have, you know, they're a weekend warrior and they get to do things on the weekend that feed their soul, but so many people have lost their connection and their awareness of the things, you know, what's real, what's not real. Like it's all doors of perception. It's all, you know, what you choose to see, and, you know, if your eyes are really open. And I think as artists, you know, like we strive to see the kernels of truth and meaning, and really break them apart and expand those things so that other people notice them as well.
Mm-hmm. I think The Matrix was probably a documentary, and you know, that's a
Yeah. But then all, you know, like all of the, you know, sci-fi, futuristic, post-apocalyptic, you know, writings throughout history have always been, you know, just veiled political statements, you know, about what's going on in the world. You know, I remember reading 1984 as a kid, and I remember realizing when we were not even quite there yet, wow, it's really, you know, it's really what's happening. It's not that different. And you look at it now, you know, 35 years later, and it's this, you know, we're so far beyond that even. And that seemed unimaginable at one time, you know, but like technological advancements make it so that we have smartphones, and we can click on, you know, like click on the page and see somebody on the other side of the world in a moment and have a conversation, you know, things that I don't know. And this is just, it's just a tool. It's just holding energy and transmitting energy, and it's all just energy. It's all just vibrations of things. So back to what you were saying at the very beginning.
I think there's something really interesting also about this principle. You know, it seemed that more than almost any other principle, this idea of mental state and mental influence is really talked about in this principle. And the ability to modify, influence, and alter polarization and frequency by really changing one's own mind states. It's actually very Buddhist in principle, you know, this principle, but it, you know, you talk, Jake, about, you know, practicality. I think that there's something very practical about understanding the relationship to our own mind states, you know, and sort of the responsibility of attending to those mind states and not just being at the effect of them as if we have no way of cultivating them. And therefore, when we do, the ability to then induce, they talk about induction, you know, induce other mental states in other people, you know, and raise their frequency and their vibration.
Yeah, they talk about how, you know, hate and love are two different sides of the same pole, and how most people are kind of under the influence of involuntary shifts of these things, but that the master hermeticists understand the art of transmuting evil into good or love into hate, and therefore is the master of their own mental state.
Right, and that's very Buddhist psychology. That's very, not that that matters that it's Buddhist, but you know.
Right, and there's not a lot of people in the world that really take responsibility for their states of mind and realize that they have agency over them, and that if you feel one way, you can actually change the way you feel through certain exercises and practices, you know, and over time you can get better at controlling that. etc.
That's the challenge, definitely. Just the recognition of that is a challenge.
I mean, I think we all came to the realization that given the polarized state of the world, and that so much of the conflict in the world arises out of polarization, that there is something incredibly practical about this principle. And that if you can somehow shift people's perspectives to seeing things from a unified perspective rather than seeing polarity in everything, then you could create a much greater amount of peace and harmony and cooperation on the planet.
That would be Alex Gray's The Great Turn. Would that be in the same concept as polarity? Out of the dark into the light?
His work that's his main subject, is the unifying polarities.
All right, everybody. Great to see you all. I got to check out. I'll see you next week. Jake, love you.
Thanks for coming. Love you
right.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Anybody?
I kind of wonder where like neutral experience fits into polarity. So I know that there's like a big focus in like neutral experience in like Buddhist philosophy, but that's not really what we're diving into. But I wonder if they kind of touch on that in the book.
I guess if you can see things as being part of the same continuum, then that neutralizes the extremes, right? Where you're not under the illusion that things are different, but they're actually the same. And so you're not as influenced by the idea of like, oh, this is good or this is bad or this is hot or this is cold, but you see it all as one kind of like neutral, different shades of gray.
Right. Cool. I'm Ben, by the way.
Amen.
Okay. Hello, I'm Mercedes. I'm from Argentina. Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, my connection is bad. I learned a lot. I learn a lot with psychedelics because sacred plants show me the truth or the reality, and I understand polarity like just a game. We are humans, like a video game. We are an avatar, and we have to, I don't know, feel love, hate, and another kind of feelings to learn, just to learn, because we choose to be here like a part of God or wherever you want, and to know himself through us, and we just play the game, but we sometimes we just the ego try to just disconnect us from the fountain, God, or the one, and we just can remember that we are the same thing, energy, vibration, and just one conscience. And I learned that we have to be just we have to be awake. I don't know how to say it. Oh, sorry if my internet just collapsed. And that's all. That we choose to be here. We choose to be humans. And sometimes when you have bad experiences, it's because you have to learn a lot. And the people who had very bad experience, they learn to heal and to face it, and they are very strong people. But well, so it's just a game, but it's difficult to be just I don't know how to say, to be with the conscious just clean and see that. That's all.
To let go of fear, maybe? Like,
Sorry?
if you think of it, to let go of fear. Like, if you think of it like it's just a game, and, you know, if you lose the game, and you're out of the game, but you can always come back in another body, in another incarnation, and play the game again.
Yeah.
Yes, but I don't know. I think that you can choose that.
You maybe
I
lose
don't
all
know,
your
but
progress, and you have to go, you know, you have to start from the start again, from being a baby, you know?
yeah,
And you have to go through all the
yeah.
levels.
like the oh sorry, like the chapter of the series, the Netflix series, uh, the Midnight Gospel, that they explain that the the prisoner that died and returned to life and return and just awake a little more and then just go out from the samsara.
Mhm.
What do you
Yeah,
guys?
that's the key to, I guess, like to being immortal, is to realize that although we die in a body, our consciousness or our soul or our spirit is infinite, and life as we are, and you know, this energy that we're all a part of is undying. And I guess that's like what all the spiritual traditions throughout history have always tried to get people to wake up to. And psychedelics help a lot, but it's like, how do you get it is like a serious question though, is like, how do you get people in general, how do you shift the consciousness on the planet to wake up to that, you know? And I do think psychedelics play a part in that, but I think it's like, it's a bigger, like, I don't think the answer is just to like dose the water supply, you know, like it's more nuanced than that. It's a big job.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about forgiveness? Forgiveness being the driver to that mental alchemy. That's a big one.
Yeah.
It's not only forgiveness for ourselves, it's everything else and everybody else, and
that's why Ho'oponopono is so powerful. And so, and also what all of you have been talking about, it's really, I think right now what we're going through, as above, so below, like macrocosm, microcosm, little pockets of people are going through the experience that as a whole, as the collective is going through. We're all gradually, like some have a little further ahead than others, but we're all shifting out of the victim consciousness and taking responsibility in whatever way that experience plays out for each individual and for the collective, you know? And so the polarization is forcing that neutralization, which is forgiveness, really is. And I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've seen lately, I'm just like, why can't somebody just go say, hey, we were wrong. I was wrong. Is there anything I can do? You know, it's like, there's so much power in that. I have turned from hating someone to being seriously praying for them to have all the things that I wanted for myself. And hate that I had in my heart, I don't feel any, I don't feel love, really. I mean, I love people, like love that this is another being, but it's not like I have a neutral feeling about this person. And it's seriously, that is alchemy. But on a big level, it requires many people to get on the same page. And that's just going to take a little more maneuvering.
I see it happening a lot.
But forgiveness, I do believe that is the key. I love it.
Forgiveness and compassion. That's the other word I put out there, because if you can have compassion, that's where you find that forgiveness. Like, people, you know, we're all human, and humans are flawed by nature, and people make mistakes, but that's how we evolve. That's how we learn and grow and change. But, you know, we need to forgive ourselves too, because, you know, a lot of the people who I see as being the most damaged are defensive and make justifications for their behavior instead of just saying, hey, I made a mistake, you know, I'm really sorry, and making that shift and making that change.
It requires taking responsibility. It's really hard to do sometimes, you know?
Yeah. And some of it is, you know, the things like systemic racism, you know, which has come to this really big head right now, where, you know, it's years and years of perpetuating something that, for a lot of people, like I, you know, I don't support racism, and in this conversation over the past, you know, year or two, I've been made aware of how, you know, the ways that I participate in subtle racism just by not being aware. And, you know, and I've shifted that story for myself, but it's like, there's, you know, there's still so much marginalization. There's still so many people who are not treated with the same respect and humanity, you know, because they're lesser in some way, that, you know, they don't speak the language, or they don't, you know, they don't have a good job, or whatever is going on, you know, or just by the color of their skin or the language that they speak, you know, being not native, which is such hypocrisy. One of the reasons that the natives gave, you know, the Native Americans gave up their land so freely is because they never believed in possessing the land. You know, that they were a part of the land and the land was a part of them, but they didn't own it. It just, you know, it was its own thing, and they, you know, they shared with the land, and so they couldn't understand that concept of ownership of land. And you know, the whole notion, it's like you can't take any of it with you when you go, you know, like when you leave your, you know, this body behind, and you know, it's all just things, but those things are part of us. It's like that whole notion of each thing just being energy vibrations, and some things vibrating slower or faster make them seem, in our perception, more solid or ethereal, but it's all just energy. And it's all, we have this agreement that, like money and the whole idea of systems of money, it's a piece of paper. We've all agreed that that piece of paper represents something, and that something has a specific monetary value, and then that value gets transferred to things. But I'm much more interested in energy exchange, in barter, and sharing our gifts with each other. If, like, I have a certain skill and you have a different skill, we can help each other. We don't all have to have all the skills, but we all have to share our collective abilities. And I think, it's that notion of living in community and tribe and larger groups of people living together collectively and cooperatively.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to touch on the point, just because a lot of things were going through my head while you were speaking on systemic racism, and it just reminded me of the microaggressions we can be doing that we're not really aware of. And that all comes down to what the other person is feeling at the other end, which is offended. And then you have comics, stand-up comics, who could light up a room with that vibration of laughter and just making light of certain situations in the comic sense, yet it's so detrimental to society. And so in terms of polarization and embracing agreeing to disagree, we also, I guess, have to take in consideration that a lot of the things that we may be offended by are personal constructs that we have developed in our mind space of what society is teaching us. So how do we bridge that gap with learning to laugh at the things that that we are taking offense by? It's just because, honestly, I'll give you an example. A coworker and I, he's Canadian, I'm Peruvian, and there's always this little bit of racist jokes that we do between him and I, but it's just between him and I, and we embrace it and we don't get offended by it. But if we were to take this out of our relationship, oh my goodness, you don't want to know. So how do we embrace that without so much of getting offended? I find that funny. It's like sometimes we have to hide our comedy because, how do you guys see that? I don't know. That's what I was thinking when you were talking. Yeah.
I think that when
It
can I
says
say
that
something?
humor
Okay.
is opposite. Isn't that, it's the book that you were reading, right, Jake? It's like Liber something, and it
Oh,
says
Liber.
Liber something, and it said that humor is the universe's joke. It has no opposite. Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that when you get to a point of consciousness where you don't see life as being so real, or like you start to see it as either a simulation or as just, a play, as they like to call it in Hindu belief systems, or like a game, all these ways that make light of the life situation, then you don't take stuff that seriously, and you develop a kind of like universal sense of humor about it, about everything, I guess, when you get to that state of consciousness. So I think that part of that is just trying to get people to take things less seriously by having an experience of things being insubstantial, and having a breakthrough experience on psychedelics can help that, or having certain kinds of spiritual awakenings. But yeah, I do think there's like an under-acknowledged position that comedians take, where they are kind of like these powerful transmuters of energy, and they do help that. They help the enlightening of the collective experience in a way that's, I think, under-acknowledged in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think when I was having my 5-MeO DMT trip, which was insanely horrific but beautiful at the same time, I was also introduced that the universal energy, was also a comedian in a sense. It's like, we're gonna put, I was put in this loop of like eternal hell, but eternal heaven at the same time. And there was a sense of joking around behind it. And I was just in despair until I gave in, and I said, okay, surrender to this, do whatever you want. And this is when I came out of my trip. But it's just, and that's the same energy that I see when I see the comedy that we experience here as humans. But I find that a lot of us would take that as an offense at certain instances in life, right? So, yeah.
It's kind of like how the Fool is the most enlightened tarot card, but it's also it seems like the comedian is the fool, but yet, and everybody's like, oh, that guy's an idiot, but like he's actually the enlightened one.
Right. If you look through history, it's like not just the political comedians that are around right now. But even in like medieval times, the court jester was one of the only people who could get away with actually calling out people in, you know, people of power in the horrible things they were doing, because they did it comedically. And I look at people like Stephen Colbert, who constantly calls out not just Donald Trump, but like all the people politically who are just doing like mad, crazy, horrible things. And he does it in a way that wakes people up, and it makes you laugh, so you don't resist hearing it. And he gets through to a lot of people. I've watched people really shift what they think by listening to that. And you know, he's not the only one, but he's definitely a really good example of somebody who's doing some really amazing work in the world with comedy.
Yeah, I'm under the belief that, sorry, I'm Danielle, nice to meet you guys.
Hey.
I have the belief that, you know, there's not necessarily such thing as a joke. It's all of our, you know, it's your perception of it. And so if you choose to take it personally, then that means a part of that joke hit you in some way that you associate yourself and the beliefs that you have about yourself with that joke. And they say, like, since, you know, we were kids, they say, you know, sticks and stones may break our bones, but words will never hurt me. So if you don't see that what they're saying is a part of you, it's not going to hurt you. But if you take that and you internalize it and you make that a part of you, and that's your choice in doing so, or maybe there's actions that you're taking that make it that way, then you can, and you probably might take offense to jokes and things like that and internalize it. But that really just says, you know, a couple of things. One is that you can examine yourself and see what it is within you that is triggering you from that comedy, or you can laugh it off and you can say, that's not a part of me, you know, and you have that choice, and maybe do a little bit of both.
Well, and it's also, you know, I keep coming back to political comedy because that's really present for me right now. And it has been a way that's been helping me move through my frustrations and struggles around the things that are happening around me. Because if I can laugh at it, then I'm not crying about it. And sometimes it's that really, really fine line, because I'm laughing at things that are really, really painful things that are real and scary. But if you can break it down to a place where it's humorous, it's not as scary. And you're not, you know, you're not looking at it from that perspective of fear. You're looking at it from a, like, no, this is ridiculous. It's not, you know, it, and it's surreal, and it's sort of, you know, takes you out of that space of just being caught up in your emotions about it, and it just becomes a story, and then you can separate and say, okay, this is a story, but I don't have to accept this story. I can change the dialogue. I can change the trajectory.
Mm-hmm. That's the power of words. Words are magical. We are under a spell of words all the time. So I think to master any kind of energy, you do have to become the master of words. And whatever words you're able to regurgitate outside, you have to believe them. So when we develop that shield against people's words, their magic has no effect on us, right? So if
you have no power over me.
Right? So if this is where perception comes, if I have issues about my weight and somebody comes and tells me I'm fat, I'm gonna go home and suffer over this. But if I'm in love with my body, anybody says anything like that, doesn't even faze me, right? So we are in this illusion caught up with the power of words. And I think that's, you know, one of the number one things we need to work on, and just knowing what to say to ourselves first, and then knowing how to express it.
I found the book referring to, but it's the Liber Null. I think I can read it real quick. It's just a couple sentences here. It says, all attempts to reorganize the mind involve a duality between conditions as they are and the preferred condition. So basically, virtues like spontaneity, joy, pride, grace, these states of mind might be arbitrary if chosen, but transmutation, they're specific virtues one given. The first antidote of imbalance and possible madness of magical trance. The second is specific against obsession. And the way that you do that is with laughter, non-attachment, and non-disinterest. And attaining these states of mind accomplishes by a process of ongoing meditation. One tries to enter into the spirit of the condition whenever possible. Consider laughter. It is the highest emotion, for it can contain any of the other forms of ecstasy to grief. It has no opposite. Crying is merely an underdeveloped form of it, which cleanses the eyes and summons assistance to infants. Laughter is the only tenable attitude in the universe, which is a joke played upon itself. And so it has the ability to set any emotion or polarity into neutralization.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a book too. It's one of the best books ever written about magic, and all of Peter J. Carroll's work is really fascinating. There's some like weird stuff in that book too, but
There is.
You don't have to like everything about it. There were some parts of that book that were like totally mind blowing to me though. So
They
I
even
guess
talk
it's
about amnitas in there. They talk
oh
about
yeah,
it
really.
in there, the mushrooms.
That's cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, guys, I'm gonna like dip out of here in 10 minutes. We can either like conclude this call for everybody in 10 minutes, or I could also designate another person as a host, and then after I leave, this conversation could continue. How do you guys feel?
I need to pop out. It's like 1 a.m. here, so.
Yeah. Same
Yeah.
with me.
Okay,
2 hours.
let's give ourselves 10 more minutes, then we can wrap up the conversation. And that's like 2 hours is a pretty good amount of time for these meetings anyway, I think.
Mhm.
Cool. So we talked
What was
about
that author you just mentioned?
Peter J. Carroll. He's the kind of
Carroll?
he was the founder of the Initiate Order of Thanateros, which was a group in Midlands, England, that was doing magical practice and experiments, and it formed the basis of what's called chaos magic.
What was his last name? Carroll?
Carroll, Carroll.
Okay.
But yeah, we talked about the principle of vibration and the principle of polarity, and covered a lot of really fascinating subjects related to those things. Does anybody have any closing thoughts about everything we've been talking about for this session?
Maybe I can just talk a little bit more about Alan Watts said that this is like a movie. In a movie, you need a problem just to make it a little bit. Just it's part of the life to have problems, to grow up and solve them. So if you don't have that, there's no movie, there's no story. So you're like I don't know, an actor of your own life. So you have to face it like that. That's all.
And do what you can to spread your light. I mean, in my workplace, like a mental health counselor, we have a completely different structure to support our clients. But I use a very spiritual and the same magic that I practice at home. I found ways to use it to spread that light up on people, so it can bring about more awareness of who they are, and some work in consciousness. And it's helped me with my own parenting. I have 2 preteen children, so I'm a very conscious parent. So it's just about you know, we all have the ability to spread this magic. It starts with making sure that we work on ourselves and finding little ways to manipulate, and manipulation can be extremely positive. We can find ways to manipulate that and cause effect, and not be, you know, manipulated by in the negative sense, but rather manipulate in a positive way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
It's
I
called
think like
manifestation. I'm sorry. It's like,
yeah,
it's called
totally.
manifestation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think like the whole point of being alive is to have fun, and people forget that. And the mission is to be able to have as much fun with life as possible while also helping other people have a more fun time, you know, and helping to wake people up and wake to the possibilities of just enjoying life and existence a little bit better.
Mhm. Yeah, tapping into that inner kid. Like I really like that you said that, because we often forget to have fun and to be like, you know, innocent children. It's, you know, like, so I think it was, I think Stewart, I can't remember his name, Ben Stewart, talks about engaging ourselves, you know, in good spiritual, mental, physical practices. And one of the things that we're lacking as adults is we hardly play. We hardly play. Imagine getting together with your bros and playing hide and seek. We don't do that, but how fun would that be? You know what I mean? It's like we forgot to do that. And the more we tap into that youthful energy, the more we re-energize and we can cause effect. So it's
Now imagine doing that on mushrooms and think about just how
I had an adult play group for a while, and we used to do things like, you know, we would have a couple of like toddlers in the room, and we would do exactly what they did, you know,
Yeah.
and we would, you know, sit on the floor and play with blocks and just, you know, be as silly as we possibly could, you know, and we listened to lots of kid music when we were doing that, like, you know, Dan Zanes, or like, you know, just
mm,
silly, wacky stuff. And it was a good way to just get out of like your serious day-to-day stuff and just be really silly and playful and look at things with new eyes.
that seems to be like one of the best parts of having kids. Like I'm not really at a point where I want to do that yet, but like just that you can play with them, and it's like for the time that your kids are like young kids, you can still be like a kid again with them. You know, like when I've observed like people like playing with their kids, it seems like you get to kind of relive that a little bit, which seems like fun.
absolutely. My kids call me bro sometimes. They're like, bro, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I don't get offended. I know this is their thing right now. I was cool back in the day. It's their turn now, you know? It's just being open-minded to all that stuff. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Man.
Right on. Well, thanks guys. This was really fun. We covered some really interesting ground today. And next week we'll go back in. We're still not done with the principles, so we'll start with principle 5, the principle of rhythm, and we should be able to probably get through the last 3 principles next time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can keep reading on in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Good to see everyone.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. This is so wonderful, enriching.
Sure. And Shara, spread the word to the Vision Train if other people want to. You can either just like forward them the Zoom link, or they can send me their email or whatever. But it's totally open for anybody that wants to join in.
Yeah, I will definitely mention it. I think I will be on tomorrow, so and I can put it in the conductors chat and like let people, you know, let the movers and shakers know.
Awesome. Cool.
I've been telling my friends too. I'm like, you guys, there's this magical book club. Cool. So
Yeah, for sure.
I know I've told a bunch of people and they're yet to bite.
yeah, it's planting seeds, you know, just kind of, hey, this is available. someday maybe you'll show up. It's a fear thing because magic scares people. A lot of
Magic scares people, for sure.
And, you know, we just have to hold their hands and let them know it's not from the fire.
It's not their fault too. Like there's been a lot of horror movies made about witches and magic, and I mean, people are kind of brainwashed to be
Not
afraid
one of
it.
them has gotten it right either.
No.
Not even close.
Right. Well, probably like a real to the facts movie about magic, like wouldn't be quite as exciting as sort of like the Hollywood versions of it.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, there's some stories out there. You know, and there's definitely dark magic as much as light magic.
Yeah.
It's all out there. It's all been, you know. But
yeah,
I think magic gets a bad rep in the, you know, cultural perception or misconceptions.
Well, because it's the will. It's the question of will, and in magic, it's about using your will to affect change. And Christianity and a lot of religions say that you should resign your will to a power outside of yourself.
Right,
So,
but the truth is, the secret is that we are all the divinity. We are God. It is within each and every cell of our being. You know, and so, you know, we don't need somebody else to tell us.
Well,
you know,
wait a minute. What's going to happen when everybody realizes that they're God and then just people stop going to church on? We have a business to run, so.
Well, it's the church state argument. It's that, you know.
I was thinking that earlier. I was like, maybe I should start a church.
I think Vision Training is my church.
That's what we could see how that works. If there can be like the first ever Zoom church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
I bet there's already some Zoom churches out there.
Oh, there are.
Yeah.
I bet.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
This was beautiful.
Yeah, much love. Bye to all of you. I'm going to press the red
Bye.
button. Bye.